Do you remember when horror films used to be good? That's not to say all horror movies from years ago were solid gold, but these days they're incredibly rare. You get one good horror movie a year. If you're really lucky, you sometimes get two.
I want more.
I was inspired to make this video because I've seen a lot of bad horror films in the past couple of years, and they've all shared the same problems. With the popularity of It from last year and more recently A Quiet Place, I'm hoping people will start paying attention to the genre and will get people making horror movies that actually care about them. Not just some lazy crap thrown into the cinema to exploit the audience and make some quick cash. The horror genre is one of my favourites because it's so versatile. The things that are possible in a horror movie are only limited by the writer's imagination and the budget. The possibilities are enormous. You can have monsters, the supernatural, psychological, slashers, comedy, and even romance. Horror films have nearly always had low budgets, but the hope was that the story and the characters would get you through. But with a lot of films in the genre recently, story and character are an afterthought, if they're thought about at all. Sound and lighting are perhaps more important in horror films than any other genre. Honestly, I think the lighting is one of the reasons a lot of people look down on Ghostbusters 2. The original Ghostbusters was lit like a true horror movie, but by the time the sequel came around, the cartoon was popular and they wanted to aim it more towards kids, and so they lit it like a normal comedy, with flat, even lighting. It's a lot less visually interesting and loses a lot of the mood the original had. Lighting goes a long way to creating tone and atmosphere, and it also gives a shadow for the monster to hide in. It just feels like we're getting worse horror films with less and less variety. We get some kind of supernatural film where the ghost dicks around for half the movie before it suddenly decides to start killing people. Or we get some stupid slasher gore fest where the characters are so obnoxious the audience actively root for them to die. I've honestly seen a number of films where the characters are so unlikable, sometimes intentionally, that you're rooting for them to die. And if you want them to be killed, how could it possibly be scary when they die? It can't, that's how. At that point, you're not empathizing with the characters. You want the villain to kill everyone, and there's nothing scary about that. In order to find it scary, the audience needs to be able to insert themselves into the shoes of the person who is in danger. You have to identify with whoever is at risk. That way you feel for them, you're happy when they live, sad when they die, and you get scared when they do. It's not that hard to do. You just have to write characters that act like real humans and not complete idiots. I could go on forever, like the Friday the 13th sequels, but I think I've made my point. One major problem I find in modern horror films is a lack of rules for the ghosts or monsters, and by extension a lack of motivation as well. Take a look at this interview with a cast member from Game of Thrones.
I was in London, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, Game of Thrones." I went, "Yeah." He said, "I'm a huge fan." And he said, "No, I've just been wondering, why are you still so fat?" He said, "No, I just don't believe it. Just don't believe it. I mean, you're right up north. You're not eating anything. You're trekking across landscapes and running from things all the time. You should be losing weight. I mean, you should be losing." I said, "Look, this is a fantasy show. We've got fire-breathing giant dragons. We've got ice zombies. We've got a woman giving birth to a cloud. Why is it me still being fat that you just don't buy?" Yeah.
The problem with this is he is saying just because it's a fantasy show there are no rules, but that's not how it works. Everything within the Game of Thrones universe operates how it normally would in real life unless otherwise stated. So this is a realistic show about a medieval power struggle. except there are dragons in it. Okay, that's perfectly fine. It's called the willing suspension of disbelief. The audience allows a rule of our own will to be broken in order to entertain and explore something that would otherwise be impossible, like a dragon. If there's no rules at all, I can't see any reason why in episode 6 we wouldn't have a spaceship land and out of that spaceship steps a Quagar warrior who must have looked something like a roast chicken. It would be completely absurd. You need rules to keep the world consistent and believable, and yes, even a world with ghosts and dragons. So switching back to horror movies, take this clip from Mama as an example. I hate saying that name. It makes you sound like a baby.
Not the mama.
Here's the clip.
Don't look at her. She's mad.
So you see the ghost run across the room super fast, but then it's gone. It could have easily caught up with the kids as their short stubby legs struggle with the stairs, but the ghost has completely vanished. So what are the ghost's rules? Can it run really fast or not? Can it only run fast for as long as there's a jump scare sound effect playing? And to speak of motivations, since it can clearly run fast but for some reason doesn't catch them, does it actually want to catch the kids? It confuses the rules and the motivations of the ghost. The same director went on to make It, which has similar problems, but these issues are prevalent in modern horror. If the story doesn't establish the rules and stick to them, it comes off as lazy and leaves the audience confused or creates plot holes when it contradicts itself. If you show the ghost can somehow lock doors at will, it then makes no sense that the ghost wouldn't use this ability to its advantage at every chance it gets. Simply put, don't do something for a cheap scare and then forget about it afterwards. The audience will remember. That leads us on to the next problem, which is characters acting stupid. And that's not to say a character can't act stupidly. If someone is established and developed as having poor judgment and often making mistakes, that's perfectly fine. But quite often you have completely normal, reasonably intelligent people suddenly acting like complete idiots out of nowhere just to move the plot along.
Well, if characters don't act stupid, there wouldn't be a movie.
Then there shouldn't be a movie. If you can't make a film without the characters acting like idiots just to push the story forward, then you shouldn't make it. Even small details where the characters do things a real human probably wouldn't can break that believability. Imagine you're in a library, getting really absorbed into a book and suddenly a balloon floats past. Do you A. ignore the silly balloon and continue reading your book? It's only a balloon after all. Or B. get up and follow the balloon for some completely incomprehensible reason? You've seen balloons before, but this one really grabs your attention. And the correct answer is B. Don't get me wrong, this kid was my favourite character from the film, but it doesn't make much sense he'd randomly start following a balloon around. Can you imagine what he'd be like at a birthday party? Then you have characters splitting up when it would be painfully obvious to anyone that it would be safer to stick together, or somehow absent-mindedly leaving a weapon behind that would be extremely useful. It's difficult to relate to a character that acts so inconsistently and barely human. So that moves us on to our final problem, and perhaps the biggest problem plaguing modern horror movies today. You guessed it, we're going to talk about jump scares. Just so everyone is clear, I'm defining a jump scare as something being shown on screen intended to startle the audience, accompanied by a loud, sharp sound effect. And sometimes there's not even something shown that's intended to scare the audience. Sometimes we get a loud noise for something really mundane, like a friend standing behind you, or a cat. Jump scares aren't always bad, but they mostly are. Jump scares are often a lazy way for filmmakers to get some kind of reaction out of an otherwise bored audience. They're incredibly easy to achieve. It's so easy to make a jump scare, I'll do one now to demonstrate. Except I wouldn't do that. So how many of you turn down the volume? Which just shows that a modern jump scare has nothing to do with truly scaring the audience. It's simply a loud noise with a quick edit.
Loud noises!
I understand a loud noise is simply meant to accentuate something scary happening on screen. If you've made a good film and got your audience invested, when the frightening thing happens, your audience should already be scared, and the musical sting just adds that little touch to make it a bit more pronounced. It should still be scary without that sound effect. If you think you're home alone and see someone walk past your bedroom, that should be scary in and of itself. But adding a jump scare sound effect is nothing short of annoying. Someone walking past the doorway doesn't make a noise. So adding a loud musical sting is just transparent audience manipulation. And it'd be more creepy if the person walked past in silence. I watched a film earlier in the year, I think it was Insidious: The Last Key, and they had jump scare sound effects going off left, right and centre. I didn't even know what I was supposed to be scared of half the time because there was no visual accompaniment. It was just a loud noise with nothing happening followed by someone screaming for some reason. Yeah, sure, someone you don't expect to be standing there can surprise you, but I don't think there's a need to have an orchestra announcing his arrival. Another terrible, often repeated jump scare is revealing the bad guy in a mirror or behind a door. There's no build up, no suspense or tension. It's just there, and it's just lame. Jump scares in a film can be used very well at times. The problem is when they're used lazily and there's loads of them. That's why I have a general rule of around 1 or 2 jump scares per film. Any more than that is usually a sign of sloppy filmmaking. Sure, more is fine, so long as they're earned, so long as they mean something. Jump scares do have their place, it just depends if they're used properly.
Ah! You wanna play some hockey?
Jump scares these days don't tell you anything. They just give you a loud noise and then move on as if nothing happened. There's no story element to it, no character change. The moment the sound effect ends, the entire jump scare event is forgotten about. I saw a video last year where someone talked about the jump scare in The Lord of the Rings, and it's a fantastic example. That jump scare stays with you for the entirety of the 3 films. It's not just a loud noise to startle you, it tells you something about the power of the ring. So when Boromir picks it up later in the film, it keeps you on edge. When he picks it up, the audience recalls back to when Bilbo went crazy, and it gives this new scene a lot of suspense. If you cut the jump scare from the film, this scene with Boromir would have next to no tension at all. Or consider when Sam gets the ring for a short while about 6 hours later in film time. We wonder what his reaction will be when Frodo asks for it back. That one jump scare in the first movie adds a palpable tension through the entire trilogy. That's how you do a jump scare. You could take the jump scare in The Thing as another example. Everyone always jumps at that, but it tells you so much about what the characters are dealing with and what the creature is capable of. And for the first time, the creature shows weakness. It's more than just a jump scare, and there's no musical sting. Every noise in that scene is something that happens within the film's world. It's really well done. Compare that with the jump scare from the recent Winchester. The mirror keeps turning away from him, so he repeatedly has to move it back. But the character's not doing anything that's worth its time in the film. If you took out the jump scare, what is this guy actually doing? Just taking some medicine or something? Why is this important to show the audience? Oh wait, it's not. And they showed it before anyway. So the only reason this filler scene is in the movie is for a cheap jump scare, and the audience know the jump scare is coming. They telegraph it from a mile away. So he turns the mirror repeatedly for a short while, and then... and then it's on with the story as if nothing happened. It didn't affect anything at all, nothing changed. What information does this tell the audience? Ghosts don't like using mirrors, I guess? It's a complete waste of time. In The Secret of Marrowbone, there's a jump scare when a sheet falls off a mirror. The Secret of Marrowbone, breaking new ground. And often these crappy jump scares get in the way of what little story there is. The plot can be moving along at a reasonable pace, but every 10 minutes we have to put the brakes on so the character can dick around while everything gets quiet for another jump scare. Then it's back to the story as if nothing happened. It interrupts the flow of storytelling rather than supporting it. My hope is, with the popularity of Get Out, It and A Quiet Place, horror will be looked at as a genre worth investing in. I hope people start to see it as more than just sloppy jump scares and stupid gore effects. I love horror movies. There's so much you can achieve in a horror movie, you just need a little passion. So that's my thoughts on modern horror films. I do have a 2-part video I made a couple of years ago where I recommend around 20 horror movies, so if you haven't already you should give those a watch. I'm also working on some more horror recommendations that should be coming shortly. These new recommendations won't cover any films that I've previously covered in my 2-part video, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, you can always subscribe, which, the way YouTube is run now, should give you a chance of seeing one of my videos show up in your subscription feed. And if you click that bell icon for notifications, there's a random chance you'll be notified too. But that's YouTube for you. I also have a Twitter profile as well if you want to contact me on there. I'm on social media, like the cool kids.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?